Crooked. There I am. I'm not crooked anymore.
You're not crooked.
I don't know.
Oh,
We have rain again coming today, and I am so over it. After the last couple days of sunshine, which have been quite lovely, even though it was really chilly out, um, it's very depressing to see rain again, I have to say.
rain is crazy. Okay, I am. Okay. Sorry, guys. Jen and I are testing out some new things. This is a cool thing about technology. And I can see, Jen, on my side that it's
Yeah,
streaming on both of our platforms. That's
I can see that
really
too. I've
awesome.
up in the corner, I have some little icons that have little green check marks. So
I love it. I
thanks
love it.
for making things easy because this was a challenge that we've had
Yep.
with who will host and switching back and forth, and because it only streams to one person's platform and then the other person has to download and remember to upload, and
Yeah, and that takes time.
it's not the end of the world, but as you know, there's always a million things to do. And so if technology can come alongside and help us, we're always so grateful for that.
We are always extremely grateful. And it's just proof of the evolution of of how things just continue to go and evolve. I mean, technology can be amazing, and this is living proof of it. So, yay! I'm excited, Jen. There's just more things that we'll continue to get to see
Yes.
and know.
As when I have, as you and I do, we spend a lot of time in our day on video conference with authors.
Yeah.
And that I think has been one of the great things that came out of the pandemic was that people got more used to being on video
Yes.
and more accustomed to it. And definitely our audience can skew to the older. I mean, I'm Gen X, so I will say we grew up. I mean, I was a very early technology adapter. I had a computer in 1982, an
Oh
old
my goodness.
and then for my high school graduation present, I actually got one of the very first Macintoshes.
Jen,
Um,
you were an early adopter.
so I've always had a computer. But I understand that a lot of people are not super comfortable with that. And so, as technology grows and changes and stuff like that, and it does change super fast. I actually asked my daughter a couple of weeks ago to set up a Discord server for me and to invite a bot to it and some other things
You
that I
had to
knew
me
could
had
do, but I didn't want to take the time to learn how to do it. And she plays in there all the time. And so, um, whenever there's a new technology, it can be a challenge to learn that.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great way when you can, or you can get some help to help connect
Yeah.
with people. So you and I talk to people all over the world. I in the last couple of weeks, I spoke to someone from Spain, someone from Dubai. I've talked to people from Ireland and South Africa. I have an appointment next week with someone in Australia. Those things would not be possible without technology. And so
Mhm.
I'm glad that we got to be all a lot more comfortable with that. I mean, people's doctors even now, right? Hello, Oreo. It's
I'm
so
sorry. I'm just shaking my head. I've tried to push him away, Jen.
He's like, no,
Like,
not having it.
not moving. So
Uh,
I'm just like,
Ross
fine, if I
was
ignore
just
him,
up here earlier. I guess she got mad and left, but she was up here earlier. Um, but that is
Yeah,
one of the
well,
things that came out of the pandemic because even people's doctors were like, hey, let's do telehealth for just regular questions. And so there is
yep,
much to be said. I mean, there's obviously a lot of conversation lately about AI and all of that kind of thing. But I just keep thinking about all of the tools that we have, and we can use them as tools to our benefit. So,
yeah, and I think that's a really good can as we're gonna have a day here.
Oreo's taking a bath.
Oreo's taking a bath in the middle. I think that's a good segue to a really connection to visibility work
Mhm.
because at the core, technology is going to evolve and how you do something is going to evolve, the how, but the
Yes,
why and the essence of it
change.
doesn't.
No, it
It
does not.
doesn't. So,
Whether you're going to speak over Zoom to a book club, or
yeah,
you're going to meet them in person, or you're going to speak, in front of a group in person, your
yeah,
message isn't going to change. And
right,
that personalized connection of how you personally connect with your audience, that
right,
does not change. And
right.
as I was looking through our notes today, I was thinking about the fact that part of what is frustrating for authors
Yeah.
is they want to give me a step-by-step playbook,
Mm,
step one, step two, step three, right?
yeah,
And the thing is, it's different for every author, and it can be different for every book. I mean, I have each one of my books I have launched differently. I've had different publicity things that I've done with them. Some of it's where I was in my author journey. Some of it is the book. Some of it's just different opportunities. All those
Mhm.
kinds of things vary. And so who you are as a person, oh, here comes Rocky. You can see my computer shaking because she just walked across
I
everything.
mean, the cats just know. They just know that their friend is on the other side.
To be on. No.
They just know.
Yes. But who you are, that core way that you relate, your core message, and this is why we talk so much about finding your ideal audience to begin with, very much honing in on that, because how you're going to speak to that group and that
Yeah.
those people, that's not going to change that core message. That's why they're going to come to find you, is because they want to hear what you have to say in the way you have to say it.
It is, and so knowing the nuances of you as an author and the unique elements of how technology and opportunities evolve. Today, I really wanted to like get the sifter out. Like you're going mining for gems at like Gatlinburg, Tennessee, or pick a place, Jen. We're like, you got to think of stuff and you're trying to figure out what the right stuff is. I took a step back and go, well, what's the secrets? What's the secret sauce? What's the connecting theme that remains relevant? And I came up with a couple that I think really beautifully round out our discussion. And the first one, I think, is consistency. Well, I
Mm.
don't think I know the secret sauce to book marketing success altogether. Are you laughing at Oreo?
No, I'm laughing at me because this is like
Oh,
my weakness.
I
It's
mean,
so
I
true,
will,
though. It's so true,
but
right? It's
it's like you and I showing up and doing this weekly.
yes,
It
we are
is,
consistent mostly on this.
yeah. I mean, hey, we were a few minutes behind today. But that's on me. But I mean, for literally the last year and a half or so, like we've shown up on Wednesdays. That's consistent. Showing up on social. It's about being consistent. That doesn't mean daily or 10 times a day. It's just consistent. My podcast is consistent. My message is consistent. Those consistency will always win.
Yeah,
Always.
I agree. And you are much better at this than I am. But when I talk to my author friends, even in the fiction world, they're always amazed that, they haven't sent a newsletter in a while, and then they send a newsletter and they get sales. And it's like, yeah, you just reminded people that you
Yeah.
exist, because there's a lot of noise out there. And
Yes.
so all of a sudden they're going, oh yeah, yeah, I wanted to read that book.
Yeah.
And now I remember that I wanted to read that. So I'm going to go grab that. And or it could be in the nonfiction world, you are saying the same thing. There's a number of people I follow in the nonfiction world, and then when I'm ready, I know they're the
Yeah.
person I want to go to, because
Yeah.
I've been listening to them, I resonate with them. Maybe it's not the right time, but when I'm ready, they're there. And I think having that approach of being there,
Mhm.
being consistent, just being a steady presence, will really help people remember, oh
Yep.
yeah, that's who that person is when they're ready.
It's this crossroads I talk about. It's like, you never know when your reader will be ready for you. And
Mhm.
so it's like the one extra step that if you only always looked at your feet, even though I do teach people to look at their feet, you only look at the feet and you never look up to see how far you've come or how close you are. It could be that one extra step is what was needed to sell the 300 books, to reach the 300 people, to get that publishing deal you wanted, to start a business or whatever. And so that the crossroads are that your readers, just like what you noted, will not all of them are ready for you yet.
Right.
So you don't want to think that you don't want to hold back being in front of them until, or do it once and go, well, they all know. They
Right.
won't. They forget. It's busy. It's crowded.
Yeah.
um, and I guess that takes me to the second point, is relevancy as well. And
Yeah.
so visibility works when it's relevant. I go back to my first book, Jen. There was a chapter in my first book where I talked about um, a sexual harassment situation I dealt with. And if I would have written and promoted that book the 20 years prior when it happened, unfortunately, it wasn't relevant. I mean, nobody was talking about it. The police did not side with me. They sided with the perpetrator, right? And it had, there was no cell phone. There were no cell phones. There was nothing to substantiate. But when the book came out, it was in the thick of the Me Too movement.
Mhm.
which was relevant. People were talking about stuff that they've hidden secret for decades. So you want to ensure that, that you bring up and connect your message, your book, your theme, to the things that people are talking about today in
Right.
a impactful way. Like it not just, oh, it's National Eat a Cookie Day, and and I do love hashtag holidays, but
Right.
really, what are they stirred up right now about? And
Yeah.
what is it about that has relevancy? I mean, my new book came out, this time on purpose. I announced my newest book on the first day of spring, Jen, because it has alignment and relevance to rebirth and spring, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, you need to be relevant. What do you think about that? Like when you look back at your stuff?
True. I mean, I think some things are sort of, we talk a lot about things that are evergreen,
Yeah,
that are messages that people always need to hear. And sometimes those evergreen things do intersect with what the conversation is
right,
about in the world right now.
right,
And I would say, don't make it like stretch where it's ridiculous.
right.
Like you're clearly trying to make your message fit with whatever's hot topic on the news. You don't want to do that. But I think you can have some careful, thoughtful, insightful things when you are judicious about the things you choose to speak about that align with your message. And so if you spend time thinking about your target audience, what is concerning to them, when those things come up, you have a thoughtful response
Yeah,
already because it's just part of who you are and part of your message.
yeah,
And you can take the attitude of being helpful,
yeah,
and providing some insight without being like, I'm the know it all. I have the solution. You just need my services or you need my book, and that will be the solution to your problem. Sometimes you see that, and that's really off putting. But when
yes,
you come alongside as someone who has spent some time thinking about this subject and have some thoughts that you want to share with people on it, that can be very, very relevant. And again, it doesn't even have to be, um, earth shatteringly, academic, right? I mean, I think about your book on growth and renewal.
right.
And like you said, every spring that's going to be appropriate.
Yeah.
That's going to be something people are going to be thinking about.
Mhm.
You go through different seasons of renewal all throughout your life,
Right.
and different times that you're going to want to think about that. Even if you had a book about like family memories and times around the dinner table, there's
Mhm.
certain things about that nostalgia and things that are going to be appropriate and hit different people at different times. It's not earth shattering. I was thinking today, someone was talking about grief, and they said, at one level, grief is really common. We all go through grief, and yet it's also very, very personal. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of things in life like that that we all go through, but then when we go through them individually, it feels very personal.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of thing that you want to think about and touch on. It doesn't even matter, I'll go back to my old business. You're writing a financial advisory book,
Mhm.
right? Um, Even as something like that that sounds very academic, very cut and dry because it's numbers. Money's very emotional.
Yeah.
Uh, it means power, it means love, it means security, it means all sorts of things to people. And so, my make believe author that might be writing that book, she could be talking about money in a lot of different ways as it's hitting uh, her target audience. So maybe this whole idea currently we have with inflation, she might necessarily go into the nitty gritties of inflation and why banks were undercapitalized and all these issues, but she might talk about the fact that you go to the grocery store and you can't get eggs.
Oh my, right.
A lot of people,
Beautifully relevant,
right?
right?
Because eggs are such a key piece to so much of what we make, and it's a cheap protein. And so if I can't buy my cheap eggs for breakfast or to bake something or whatever, then how am I going to take care of my family?
Yep.
That's like the deeper issue there.
Yeah.
And so I think be thinking about those deeper emotional issues that are relevant to your audience that you can speak to and come alongside and offer them some comfort and some support.
Yeah, that's a really good example. And I was thinking the same thing around when you mentioned the grief topic. You know, that type of a book could have a different level of relevancy as the holidays come around
Right.
versus a time of year when the loss actually happened versus applying the grief elements to different types of loss. I mean, this week has been a really heavy one for me. I don't know why, except that feels so. I mean, I do know why, but because all of it feels so close of what happened this week in Nashville, which is just super, super, in my backyard, and I have kids that age, and anyways, all that. So that is another level of grief. So it's like personal grief is something that you go through, but experiencing grief of what other people go through, or these tragedies, these different situations. So that's about, he's in a mood today. That's about, really making sure that the message that you're sharing and you're using your visibility. I feel like that's why you focus on value first. Like, it's not icky. It's not, oh, it's Thanksgiving. I know it's going to be rough. Go buy my book.
Mhm.
It's being honest and real of acknowledging the cyclical pattern of grief. There's a thing in the marketing industry called, I jotted it down. It's called growth hacking. I think that's the term. I've read a book about it. I heard many people talk about it, but it's this idea of you see a conversation happening and you snatch a part of that conversation and you share value in it, and it's almost like before you know it, you have almost like hacked this conversation trend to embrace the elements of what you bring to the table. And when I say that out loud, Jen, it feels icky, like, because a
Mhm.
lot of icky people do icky stuff like that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But if you remember, and this is a value point of another kind of walk away, a secret sauce for authors. If you remember, you chose one of the hardest ways to communicate a message and make sure people get it. Like, writing a book is hard. There's
Mhm.
nothing easy about it. You chose that because you believed in something, not because you were trying to get rich quick, because there's other ways to attempt that.
There's a lot easier ways to do
Right?
it.
You did this for different reasons.
Yeah.
If you embrace that and know that that's a value, then the growth hacking isn't an icky thing. Instead, it's something that is adding value to meaningful conversations that change people, change communities, change lives, and change us. And I think that is really at the core of why you would do something like that.
And I would say that it even applies to fiction. I
Yep.
was actually talked to Zan, who's usually commenting,
Oh, I'm
and
like, where is Zan?
where
She's not.
Zan is today.
Okay.
Maybe she's watching and not commenting.
Yeah.
But we were talking yesterday about the back matter of her book and the author's note. And I always talk, or the about, yeah, the
Mhm.
author. And I always talk about, why did I write this book? And I
Mm.
go back to the theme, and some of the things that I really hope the reader takes away from the book. So we're having a discussion about that. And that's one of the things when I teach fiction writing, it's one of the 5 questions, and it applies to nonfiction too. What is the theme? What is the point? Why are you writing this? There should be a greater meaning. And even fiction
Yeah.
has that. There is a way, John Truby says in fiction, you're arguing for a way of life. And
Mm.
whoever when the protagonist, the antagonist have two different ways of living. And whoever wins at the end, it's their way of life that is triumphant, that is the superior way to live.
Mm.
And so,
That's
um,
beautiful.
yeah, it's a really great way of looking at fiction. And so, as an author, you have opinions about that. You have thoughts about that. That's why you wrote the book the way that you did. And again, that's a great entry into some of these conversations and discussions. Not in the sense of, oh, I wrote a book about, my latest book is about a single mom raising a child on the autism spectrum, which is my experience. And, so I'm not going around saying, oh, every conversation about that, go buy my book because I wrote about that. Um, but,
Right.
the things that people, it touches their hearts, and they, one of the comments is, oh my gosh, I'd never known what that experience was like. Or I feel like I know these people, these are real people, or, you described my experience, or things like that. you're giving people a little bit of solidarity, of a sense of feeling like they're in community.
Yep.
And that's going to be that emotional heartstring that is going to cause them to recommend that book to their friends and to other
Mhm.
people because it resonated with them at an emotional level. And people, people ultimately buy and make decisions on an emotional level, and then they rationalize them logically. And
Yeah.
so we need to figure out what that's part of knowing our audience, is knowing what those things are, and meeting them there, not in a slimy, trying to take advantage of them kind of way, but in
Right.
a way that gives value and meaning to their life that they're looking for.
Right. And you also acknowledge something that I think is just good for us to be aware too when we're talking about visibility is some of our visibility efforts we can't control. Some we try to control, and some we absolutely can control. And you're talking about, the back matter of a book. Are you kidding, friends? That is absolutely controllable in your hands
Mhm.
of how you are, shaping up your visibility. I don't do an author's note per se. I mean, I guess an epilogue or something, but I always use the about the author. I always change it up. It is
Mhm.
not a resume. It is extra good. If you're going to make it that far, I'm going to use it to explain to you how the book is connected to something of my
Yes.
purpose.
The back matter is prime real estate. People are so invested in your story, in your message. By the time they get to that, they are all in. You have not had to convince them. They have been on this journey with you. And so, what next steps do you want them to take? What
Yeah.
do you want them to take away from this book so they're going to take action towards something, to another book that you have, to a course with you, to going to your website, to getting on your newsletter list, whatever it might be? Think about the primary action you want them to take, and that should be the place where you are pulling that out, because in fiction, and this is true for nonfiction too, but the end of your book sells your next
Yeah.
book.
It's the beginning of the next.
It does,
It's
because
a
how they
connection.
feel at the end, how they feel connected to you and close to
Right.
you, whatever action you have them take, it's either buy my next book
Yeah.
or get on, whatever you have your next thing
Sure.
is for them to do. If you're using it to open doors, and create visibility and authority and all that kind of thing, then encourage them to reach out to you in a certain way, because they have been on this journey. They know you now, they know what they're getting. They're warm prospects, they're not cold. They're probably closer to hot.
Yeah.
And so use that. That is prime real estate. Do not waste it. I've seen too many times where it just kind of falls off at the end. It's like, the book is over. There's a generic about the author, and then maybe some generic content, like contact information, and the book is done.
Done.
It's like, no, people want to
True.
know more. Give them something more so they feel that connection with you. So it feels very, very personal, and they
Yeah.
want to keep continuing that engagement.
And do it in a conversational tone. There's nothing worse to me, even if it's a business book, for somebody to start rattling off their resume at that point. Listen, if they needed to know your credentials, they would have figured that out before they read your book.
Right.
Instead, use it. I mean, I just finished a book. I don't have it up here, Jen, or I would use it as a quote for closing, but I'll share the gist of it. It's from a pastor of a church that I go to, and the book is called One at a Time.
Mhm.
And I finished it 2 days ago, and the concept is really, and I think it's just crazy how this works out. It's a good message that correlates with our topic, like your visibility, be consistent. And consistency to me is not looking at the whole, but looking at the one.
Yeah.
Just keep swimming. So anyways, he shares and kind of parallels Jesus's life and uses it as a conversation starter in our own about how Jesus is one of the most influential, no, is the most influential person that ever walked this planet. And he didn't do it trying to get, 1,000, hundred thousands of people on Instagram or having TikTok followers or making a ton of money. He did it by focusing on the one without any intention of getting the accolades. And
Mhm.
that's at the core of visibility. Focus on the one, give value, care. People will feel that. And
I
then they
tell
will
people
take
all
action.
the time, sell one book at a time,
Yeah.
one book at a time.
Yeah.
People know the difference. If I'm talking to you about my book and I'm invested in you, That's very different than if I'm looking at you, but I'm kind of looking past you because I'm looking to see what you can get me. How many more? Okay, if I sell you this book, how many more sales can you influence? Right? That's not what it's about. People feel that, it feels very icky.
It does.
The one book at a time, the one reader, answer the email, respond to the question, go to the book club,
Yes.
one at a time. That makes all the difference in the world. In this world of massive influencers and a lot of noise, anyone who takes the time to pay attention, really pay attention to somebody else, that is huge. That is
Wow.
a standout. That is very, very different than a world where it's all about how many followers and numbers and things like that can I get.
Absolutely, absolutely, and at the end of his book, his About Matter, it the even the his explanation of himself, like, I chuckled through it, right? He had humor in it, and that's what I think, we know books reach more than the one, and we know we can make an impact larger than the one, but at the end of the day, you wrote a book for the one. It's a very intimate experience when someone consumes it. So don't forget that. Don't forget the cornerstones and secret sauces of visibility, which is really about consistency and focus and timeliness and relevance and focusing on the one, to really be the most successful. Jen, I know, I mean, my brain can't even think about any of the other books or any quotes. I know you've been doing some reading too. Do you have any quotes up your sleeves or anything that's kind of sticking to you at the moment?
Well, I'm still working through Megan Hyatt Miller and Michael Hyatt's book,
Yeah.
Mind Your Mindset. And it's really, really fantastic. And one of the things they're talking about, and of course, I have the book in the dining room and not
I
here.
know, right, right.
But one of the things they talk about is the narrator in your head. And I actually started thinking about it as a librarian instead. But like they said, the narrator can only pull on the stories that it knows that you've experienced, you've heard from other people. And I just had this image. I grew up in a small town with a one room library. And I was like, that library is like my narrator, my librarian. She can only pull, like, there's no interlibrary loan. She can only pull off whatever's in there. And so we often think that our experience is the totality of all there is. And what we need to do is go grab some interlibrary loans and get some other people's experiences to add so we can make better decisions, so we can reframe, so we can look at things. And so part of how we limit ourselves, Megan talks about, she had this great fear of public speaking based on stories she had seen and heard and learned. And her whole experience of her team needed her to keynote a message for thousands of people. Can you imagine that your first speaking experience to be in front of thousands of
Oh
people?
my gosh,
You
no.
had this fear of speaking, and her whole, what she did to reframe that narration to get new stories in there was incredibly powerful. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. What do we, and I have said this, I say this, one of the very first things, foundational teachings in my
Mhm.
novel blueprint course is mindset. I start very
Mm,
beginning. How do you think about things? Because writing a book is a big ordeal. And there's a lot of places to get off track and say, I can't do it. It's too much. I'm not smart enough. Right. And
right.
so reframing that stuff, taking that stuff down, realizing that you're even thinking it is so important to having a breakthrough and doing some of the things that you're really, put on this planet here to do, and not letting yourself be limited by this narrator or this librarian that has a very limited view of what's happening. I mean, it's there to protect you. It's there to keep you
Mhm,
safe.
mhm.
But there's that famous quote, ships are most safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships are for. And
Mm,
and I can't remember who said it.
that's
It was somebody
beautiful.
famous, but I love it because it's
True.
true, right? You have to leave the safety of the harbor
Yeah.
and go out to the seas where, yes, there's some danger, but you're never going to get to your true purpose unless you leave some of that safety. And that's been a really, really interesting thing to just think about what that looks like. And so that's been really cool. I highly recommend that
Really
book,
awesome.
Your
I'm
Mindset. They
gonna have
talk
to read
a lot
it.
about that. There's a lot of they quote a lot of the psychology and the brain science and a lot of the really interesting
Mm.
work that's being done in that area. And so I know some people like, oh, that might be a little too woo woo for you. This is not a woo woo book at all. It's very
Oh, nice. It's
grounded
very mhm.
in science. And so I think there's just a lot of really powerful things about that. So I'm just taking my time as I go through it and spending time thinking about what they're saying. So
It's really cool.
I'm on like the last couple chapters.
Well, I think it's also extremely relevant because sometimes visibility work can be, um, you can. I recently in this last book I read, I've always known about fight or flight, but
Mhm.
I've never added in freeze,
Yeah.
fight or
Or
freeze.
fawn. That's the other one.
Right. Okay. So like never, but the reality is I think in our visibility efforts, sometimes if it
Mhm.
terrifies you, you
Yes.
could find yourself wanting to run, being
Yep.
stagnant,
Mhm.
going down defensively, like, and understanding and having awareness of you and what brings why you feel those ways is the
So
only way to breaking
yeah.
through.
It's very, very true. It's very true. I'm working on a new visibility strategy and it's a little terrifying.
You got this.
And
You got
I
this.
keep telling myself whenever I feel that fear come up, I'm like, well, really, where is this fear coming from?
Yeah.
And I have a whole list of things that I remind myself about. And I'm like, okay, nope, we're going to do it anyways. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And you know that, like, once you've done something that was fearful, I felt that way the first time I launched a book.
Oh,
And, every time it's like, you do it anyways. The fear is trying to protect you, but that's fine. Thank you. I appreciate you trying to protect me, but that's not really necessary, and we just move on.
don't need you, but that was wonderful.
Yeah, and once you do it, then you're okay, and then you do the next level and the next level and the next level, and that's how you move forward.
Yeah,
And so fear's not a bad thing. It's trying to protect you, but it's also not necessary. You've outgrown it. So move
absolutely.
on.
Well, we have had really good discussion on visibility this last month. Next month, I just was checking it, Jen. It's on book formats,
Oh, all the formats.
all the formats. And I'm
Fantastic.
excited about that too because I didn't know about all the formats until I got it until I got in too deep and the formats just keep evolving.
Right?
So it's
Lots
really
of options these days.
It is. So we're going to talk about the things to know and to be aware of and to navigate through next month, all about that. Thanks for joining us. And Jen, close us out, girl. Let's get us some empowerment.
Authors, your words have power, your message has power, and you have power. So we invite you each week to bring that right here as we go to the page and beyond, talking about all things books and marketing. Have a great, wonderful rest of your week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.